Why is there a watermelon there?
I'll tell you later.
The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai has a very relatable premise, I'm sure you'll agree. The black lectroids from Planet 10 have set an Earth-destroying bomb, and you, as a neurosurgeon, cutting-edge physicist and lead guitarist of a new wave band, have to stop it. I don't know about you, but I get bored doing that twice a week, and I'm very busy too with all those side hustles. 1984's The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension is the cultest of cult movies. It had a strong lineup of 80s movie stars, with RoboCop's Peter Weller as the eponymous hero, with Clancy Brown, Ellen Barkin, Jeff Goldblum, Christopher Lloyd and John Lithgow in support. As I mentioned in the previous sentence, the titular Buckaroo is quite the multi-skilled individual, and it's up to him to thwart the black lectroids from kicking off a nuclear war in Russia. They're not even that upset with us Earthlings, but instead they're a bit annoyed with the red lectroids led by John Lithgow's insane Dr. Lizardo. You see, Buckaroo, being the devil-may-care polymath musical sensation that he is, accidentally unlocked a doorway to another dimension, which Dr. Lizardo wants to use to get home. Only he's not popular at home, thanks to him being a right bastard. What follows then is 120 minutes of downright strange and often unintelligible high cockalorum that split audiences and critics when it was released in 1984. Creators Mac Rausch and W.D. Richter certainly were dedicated to not compromising on their vision, which left some utterly baffled, but those who were into it were all in. Think of it as an 80s cinema equivalent of Rick and Morty and its tiresome fan base. Buckaroo Banzai has an aggregated score of 66 on Rotten Tomatoes and a Metacritic score of 70%. Less than half of the production budget was accrued by Fox in the cinema, with the studio recouping just $6.3 million from the $17 million budget. However, it's done very well on home media thanks to its post-release cult status, and has spawned novels, comics and even talk of a series in 1998 and the mid-2010s, but this time with Kevin Smith attached. So it's done pretty well. And I don't mind it, it's fine. The computer game was released on a decidedly US-looking lineup of mid-80s computers. The Commodore 16 and 64, the Apple II and the Atari 8-bits, they all got a version of the game in 1984 and 1985, with the European computers of the BBC and the Spectrum arriving late and wheezing a year later in 1986. Think of it as sort of a mid-80s adventure game reverse of what happened in World War II then. I'm going to be lazy today and just concentrate on the Spectrum and Commodore 64 versions here, with good reason, which I'll get to soon. The game was published by Adventure International, who mainly specialised in text adventures. They were the team who put out the Quest Pro games based on Marvel properties like the Hulk, the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. The Spectrum version was released via the UK arm of Adventure International, who were behind the Masters of the Universe games and the Robin of Sherwood game that I covered back in the ancient times of about 3 years ago. The Spectrum version wasn't released on its own, but instead came out as part of a collection named after the coder called Scott Adams Scoops. Scoops isn't his surname, by the way. You probably knew that already, because he was quite famous for making the Zork series. The Commodore 64 version also had a strange release. The other side of the tape contains the Commodore 16 version, only it doesn't say it does anywhere on the tape cassette, so you'll instead be instructed to flip the cassette should you try to load the wrong version. Buckaroo Banzai uses Adams' well-known verb-noun combination type of gameplay. In terms of a plotline, as I stated at the beginning, and I hope you were paying attention, the storyline differs somewhat from the movie. There's a lot less in the way of taking on Dr. Lizardo and his sinister red lectoid gang here. Instead, you, as Buckaroo Banzai, have to get your oscillation overthruster sporting jet car up and running in order to transmit cancellation codes direct to the black electroids to stop mushroom clouds appearing all over the globe like warts on a pervert's shaft. You do this by exploring the town and locating parts all over the shop. As you can see, it's very much a standard text adventure and a very functional one. And that's about the nicest thing I can say about it. It works. You see, it's not a very good text adventure at all. Buckaroo just troops around collecting bits and doing stuff. None of the large troupe of the movie's eccentric characters are hanging about the town, so you won't be typing talk during its gameplay. The town is utterly unpopulated. There's not a single soul here. That's not a real problem per se in terms of a text adventure, except for a movie that's based around a silly comedy and absurdity. No one to interact with makes the funny aspect a little bit tricky to pull off. The game doesn't even try to be funny in its descriptions though. Buckaroo just quietly moves about town, utterly alone, quietly assembling his car. That's it. That's the game. If the movie had done that, it probably would have been profitable because it would have cost about 20p to make. You know, just have Peter Weller walking around very quietly, very somberly, just fixing his motor. Sure, no one would have gone to see it, but they didn't anyway. So maybe that's what they should have done. Just have a man fixing his car. And a dire premise for a film doesn't make for a good premise for a game either. At least the Commodore 64 version attempts something along the lines of some visuals. There are some stark, unexciting locales from the movie spotted around, such as the mountain and the Yo-Yo-Dine building. They're here, and they give some unremarkable visual context. They're not very brilliantly drawn, but they're here. As opposed to, of course, the Spectrum one, which you've no doubt noticed, clearly does just look like it was made to fill out the Scott Adams Scoop collection. The gameplay is the same, but it doesn't have anything in terms of graphics. In fact, it doesn't even have the temerity to change to a different colour to the Spectrum's default light grey background and black text. There's no graphics at all. Are you telling me that the Spectrum cannot show a couple of pictures? It doesn't even have to be the amount that the Commodore 64 has. This is just a very, very lazy port and probably the least visually appealing game that I've covered on this channel, and I can't see that being beaten. I know this is a text adventure, but Christ almighty, this is a really lazy effort. The game is a pretty decent challenge. It required me, a non-text adventure player even back then, to consult the guide for most of the duration of it. A lot of the puzzles don't make sense to me. I'm sure they do to regular text adventure people, but to me, no, I couldn't get on with it. There are a couple of nice touches. There's some timer-based situations that can put an end to Buckaroo's world-saving attempts. For instance, there's a torch battery and a bomb that both give you limited moves that ramp up the tension a little bit. But that's about it. I'm not having a go at it for being a text adventure. The Buckaroo Banzai franchise probably lends itself, for the era, quite well to a text adventure. It's just, it doesn't really do anything with it. There's no characters or humour at all. It's a good opportunity that's gone begging. It's a bad computer game and a real poor use of the licence. CNVG reviewed the Spectrum version with the other games that came in the Scott Adams Scoops collection. They gave it a 3 out of 10, and the reviewer said that it was his least favourite of all of Scott's games. And there we have it. That's a very short and quick review of what is a thoroughly unremarkable use of a cult movie. Like, subscribe, and thanks, bye.
President's calling, Buckaroo.
President of what?
President of the United States.